Hey everybody, welcome to the Storytellers Cafe, Trinity Performing Arts Center on Niagara Falls Boulevard, 711 Niagara Falls Boulevard. We're going to start in just a few minutes, and I hope this is working. I'm your host, Lorna Czarnota, and my partner is Merri Debany.
Hi, my name is Merri Debany, and I'm representing a Southern soldier, and I'd like to state a complaint right now that Lorna put my chair at an angle that makes me look very, very unattractive, more so than usual. I blame her. I'm a little bitter. Kind of wish I won the war, but didn't. She made me be the Southern soldier who's very angry.
Get over it.
Very angry. Mostly that she put me in this chair. Hope you like the performance.
So I was watching the series and myself. You know, just go before And then you're in state. And then you're in state. I know exactly which clock is on that. It tells me no when I'm home. What's going on in your work? But, you know, everyone's talking like, heard something that there's, you know, might get released, something like that, that's the most part, I don't know. But it's just, you know, with this book, and so, now that I there were things that were interesting, but at the time, so what's the picture? It's just like no. So one of the books I have on recommending is so far. They're going to be trying to live stream this. Oh, okay. But it didn't go exactly. It's all out of print. It's never look well. It's not. People have to work with they're accepting. See, I like that. It's just, I used to love to do it. It was almost like, I really Change. Bad luck. Well, in the end, I guess the worst thought was he couldn't imagine that, this wonderful league could ever evolve before I told her. So I haven't located it out. One of these days, I'm going to try to never have this. And Gettysburg is statue of the these daughters probably.
Put a lot of water in it. You want me to pee halfway through, don't you? A lot of water in here. Well, leave it, I'll find it later. I'll spend it all in one place.
Well, we're still, test, am I on?
Doesn't sound Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2.
Can you hear me? Okay. While we're waiting for a couple more people to show up, I'll go through the housekeeping. Those of you who have been here before know it, but we have some newcomers. We have Bob, who I met at a book signing. And Amy, you've been here before. I know. Amy and her friend, Donna. And then you can introduce yourselves during the breaks. Maxine, one of the singing sisters, I guess. Well, just a little bit about the housekeeping. Tonight, the Storytellers Cafe is bringing you letters home, stories of the North and South. I guess we're doing it, aren't we?
I'm here, I might as well.
We are also attempting to live stream the program tonight, so if all goes well, and it's already running, if all goes well, it'll be available on YouTube. Let's hope. The restrooms are at the end of the hall, to the left. Refreshments are on the table. There's also beverages, cans and bottles of water and cans of soda in the refrigerator. There's coffee and tea for a nominal price. The price sheet is on the table over there, and it's on your honor. This is a free event brought to you by TPAC, Trinity Performing Arts Center. They let us use the venue. And we will be passing a basket around for tips for the tellers. And don't put in things there like get a haircut, Okay. All right, so I think we're just going to get started. You don't see anybody out there, right? Just coming in. Okay, this is a very informal venue. We like to have a good time, but now it's down to business.
Come on.
Did you turn it on?
Good. But I don't want to start without having it on. I can hear. Can you hear?
Yeah.
We can hear.
All right. This is very important.
There's a car pulling in, Lorna.
All right. You do realize you have your butt to the camera.
It can't look any larger than the rest of me. Hurry, come on. Come on.
Mary walks to the window and waves the people in. They turn.
No.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Someone who doesn't like driving after dark.
Well, we'll just wait a couple more seconds then, and we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves and about the program while we're doing that. Mary and I have been professional storytellers probably about the same amount of time, and I counted 31 years this year for myself. So I have no idea, maybe 10, 15 years ago, Can't believe it's been that long, but it
You're
has.
so much older than me.
Not on live TV. Anyway, I went to Merri and said, let's do a program on the Civil War. She's very fond of telling everybody that I said I'm going to be the North, so that meant she had to be the South. And we did some research. It took us 6 years to research, write, rehearse. We went on field research, test audiences, and then we were finally ready to go live with the program. So we're excited about this one. Are they coming?
I don't know. I told him to hurry up.
Another car drove in also. Oh, that knows. Oh, you know what? It's Craig and Dawn. We should wait for them.
Okay.
You guys have guns?
They don't like it when we bring them to school, so yeah, we decided it wasn't worth the investment.
Following our main performance, which is about an hour long, of 55 minutes with questions and answers, about an hour, we'll have a brief intermission, but feel free to get up and get whatever you want from the cafe as you need it. Then we will take a brief intermission, followed by an open mic. If there's anybody who would like to tell stories, you can see me during the break and we'll sign you up. You do not have to be a professional storyteller to do the open mic. In fact, it's a good, safe place to try something new. Hello there.
We were waiting for you. We saw you
Oh.
coming. Saw you coming.
You didn't see anybody else out there, did you? Nope, all right.
That's okay.
Well, then, as soon as our last guests are seated, that's what I love about the Storytellers Cafe. We have guests. And we know the names of almost everybody. And that's fun. I like it. All right. Why don't you move up just a tad more?
Because it makes me look good. Actually, no, because if I sit here, you
All right,
can
then
just
I
see
will
that.
have to move back just a little.
I'm still in front of my closet.
Bobby, you're on TV, so make sure you clap really loud.
You look great. You look good. Okay, are we set? Hey, straw. Hey, straw.
Where your eyes that used to smile, how
Hey,
rude,
straw.
how
Hey,
rude. Where your eyes that used to smile, how rude, how rude. Where your eyes that used to smile, and my poor heart you first beguiled. Oh, why did you run from me as a child? Johnny, I hardly knew ya. They say that the boys from the South are no more than green farm boys walking around with a bunch of hay on one leg and a bunch of straw on the other, not knowing their left from their right. Hay, straw, all the day. But the truth is, they ain't as stupid as they look. And they bleed as red a blood as you or I. Now, I've been talking to some of the veteran soldiers, and they've been saying, we don't even have to be fighting this war. If only the southern states had listened when the government told them they was going against the Constitution of the United States. That very piece of paper signed by Thomas Jefferson and the rest. Well, didn't it say all men was created equal? I reckon they meant the whites and the Negroes, and maybe women as well. And then I've seen the slaves that escaped, their arms and legs scarred and bloodied from the shackles, their families torn apart, their spirits broken. It isn't right for one man to own another. And then they're talking about secession. Huh, what did they think they was doing when they joined the Union? That means united. It means if you have a problem, you stick it out and you solve the problem together. You don't go running off with your tail tucked between your legs. And as I see it, those are very fine reasons to be fighting the war. I don't want you to think poor on me. I'm as patriotic as the next. But I will admit, I signed up for the money. Now back home, as a woman, I was rolling 30,000 rounds of ammunition in the ammunition depot for $7 a month. and it was dangerous work. I seen many a lady blown up. Here, as a soldier and a man, I'm making $15 a month, almost twice as much. And I send some of it home and I put some of it away. And when this war is over, my brother Billy will go to school. He'll not be a hard laborer like our father. He'll be a lawyer or a doctor, healing where I've done harm. You might think to ask me, knowing what I do and all, if I'd sign up again. Well, training camp, that weren't too bad. Well, there was a lot of marching back and forth, day, night, rain, snow, and shine, and all under the command of that dreadful Colonel Ames. A hard man he was. But I survived. It weren't until we was out of training camp that I found out what the war was really like. There was some fighting in a place called Antietam. And we was green, only 2 weeks out of training camp. They didn't want to send us right into battle, so they held us in what they called reserves. But they didn't have enough surgeons for all the wounded. They were looking for volunteers in the hospital, so I stepped up. And that's when I seen what the war was really like. Well, all those boys being brung in on the stretchers, their arms and legs torn apart, crying for their mamas and saying, "Don't take my leg, don't take my leg." Well, there weren't enough surgeons. So what could they do? Off come the arms and the legs, and they threw them in a pile, and by the end of the day, that pile was as high as a man. Now an officer, if he loses a leg, they give it a funeral. A right proper burial they do. But those boys lost their arms and legs. They was lucky. They didn't lose their lives. So you ask me if I'd do it again? I'd have to say no. Dearest Emily, I've seen so much I doubt little will impress me anymore. Finally, I'm able to sleep, and the nightmares have stopped. In fact, I seem to dream little at all. Sometimes it feels as though I'm seeing my life through someone else's eyes, but I go on. I beg you not to tell our mother where I am or what I'm doing. She only needs to know that I'm safe. It would not be good for her to know that I'm off soldiering. We're fortunate to have a good cook in our mess. His name is Jamie, and he makes me laugh. There's a small campfire tonight, and Jamie has prepared some found pork, as it's so close to Christmas tide and all. I took leave to pass your cake among the men. They truly enjoyed it, and I do believe you'll hear some offers of marriage. It will be lonesome this Christmas, and I will miss our home. Please write and let me know if there is snow, and if Mother served her roast. The night is quiet, except for a few of the boys singing at the other end of the camp. Camptown ladies sing this song, doo-dah, doo-dah. Camptown racetrack 5 miles long, oh, the doo-dah day. Oh, it's funny how much the boys on both sides like to sing. And sometimes when the officers aren't looking, they sneak out of camp to eat, chew some tobacco, sing some songs together. Then in the morning, it's back to the battle. Speaking of officers, Colonel Ames is making the rounds. He's a good enough officer, but the men do not like him. They're plotting to kill him, and some have written to the governor with complaints. Tomorrow he will march us to Fredericksburg, where trouble is surely brewing. The Rebs have blocked the way to Richmond, but at least we're marching south. Sister, I am having second thoughts. Your loving sister, Lorna.
Dear Mother, I never thought we'd get our orders, but we finally did. I thought this war would be over before I got to do my share of fighting. Doc Simmons, he's our doc back home. He said he figured the war would be over in 9 months. Guess we all did. Who would have thought 2 years later, them Yankees would still be so stubborn as to keep fighting? Well, the only thing more stubborn than a Yankee soldier is a Confederate soldier fighting for the Confederate States of America. Still, I was afraid I'd miss the adventure of a lifetime if this war ended before I got to do my share of fighting. I mean, who would have ever thought I'd be more than 20 miles away from home? And now here I am, hundreds of miles away in a place called Pennsylvania. And I've met all kinds of folks too. I know you are angry with me for enlisting, but if North Carolina and the mother Confederate states are fighting for the right to make their own decisions, independent of Mr. Lincoln and all them other Yankees, shouldn't I be willing to fight for the same rights for myself? With all due respect, Mother, the life I want and the life you want for me are not the same. I'm not ready to settle down for the rest of my life in a little town marrying someone I'm supposed to because it's what folks expect of me. Maybe after the war, I'll think different. For now, this is my chance to fight for what I believe in, and no damn Yankee's going to tell me what my future is or ought to be. I mean, for crying out loud, isn't that what this country's founded on? The right to choose how we're going to live, how we're going to die? And I can think of no more noble reason to fight than the right to choose as individual states. Doc Simmons said there wouldn't even be a war if the first states had addressed the issue of slaves when they were first declaring their independence. Nobody wanted to argue over a new can of worms, I guess. Nobody wanted to make slavery an issue. I think Doc Simmons got a pretty good picture of things. He's a smart man. Mother, we're camped for tonight. Tomorrow we'll be back marching. Colonel Bergman says there's a town nearby that has some shoes we might requisition for our boys. Someone's got a copy of the book and is going to read it to the rest of us. Private Lucas has his harmonica out. He's already playing a sweet ballad. It's moments like these that make me think of home. A loving child, East St. Mars.
Emily, it's been 2 months since the march to Fredericksburg, which was a complete fiasco. We arrived late and saw little of the battle, which was just as well, for so many fine boys were killed and died, and the city was ransacked. You must promise that if the Rebs somehow get as far as Maine, you will take our mother and flee at the first mention of their coming. What horrors a man could do to his brother, I could scarce believe had I not seen it with my own eyes. That night after the battle, we Mainers spent in hell itself. We was pinned against a cold hillside of an earthwork. All night we listened to the thump of enemy bullets as they hit our fallen comrades. God help us. Orders came to march north again, and that's to the complete displeasure of the men, having come as far south as we have. We was ordered through a god-awful swamp, where whole pieces of artillery was swallowed. But our fate wasn't much better. And regrettably, I lost my shoes. Now the doctors are going from camp to camp, and they say there's dysentery and a fear of the smallpox. The doctors will vaccinate us. Perhaps that is good. Chancellors go. Many of the men are sick with the pox. It's bad enough to get it on your own, but the doctors gave it to us with their injections. Some of the men have died. So far, I am well. A drummer boy from Company A, Moses Warren, he blew his hand off loading his rifle over the campfire. And we're depleted to half our number. Jamie, our cook, and my friend, is dying. He gave me the shoes. I wonder when this terrible war will end. Your sister and friend, Lorna.
July 1st, 1863. Dear Mother, what I've seen today is beyond the imagination of man, and no amount of drilling or training could have prepared me for the devastation that I've seen. Two days we was camped in a place called Cashtown, Pennsylvania. About 9 miles east of us was another little town called Gettysburg. And our regiment, the North Carolina 26, along with quite a few other fellers, we was ordered to go over to Gettysburg and get some shoes. There's supposed to be lots of shoes over there. Our boys were footsore. Can't tell you how many fellas lost their shoes out marching. Well, our regiment and another regiment, we was ordered over to go get them shoes, and we were under orders not to pick no fights. If we see any Yankees, not to pick no fights and keep our heads down low. Well, we get about 1.5 miles away from that Gettysburg when up in the hills, we see some fellers on horseback moving around up there, some Yankee boys, and they look like trained cavalry to us. Well, we was told not to pick no fights, so we hunkered down real low, and we figured we should go back and tell them that Gettysburg has Union boys in it, Federal boys in it. So we go back, and the higher ups, they say, no, General Hath and General Hill, they say, no, it's just got to be militia boys. But Colonel Berg, when he tells them that it looked like they've been too trained for that, they got to be militia. Didn't matter. We were ordered to go back and get them shoes. Well, it rained the night before, so the marching was thick, and we got maybe about 3 miles away from Gettysburg when we had to bivouac for the night. We were down at the bottom of a ravine. Well, don't you know, the next morning, the whole rest of the division comes marching right down that road. When our brigade goes by, we hop right in line with it, and we start marching too. No sooner do we start going up the side of that ridge when shots ring out. Well, the first 2 brigades in front of us, they hunker down, we all fall down behind them, and we're laying on the road, and we just wait till finally the shooting stops. And then those first 2 brigades, they're ordered to take battle lines off the side of the road. And our brigade, and the one behind us, we're supposed to keep going forward, march to the top of that ridge. Well, we get up to about the top of that ridge, and all of a sudden, shots ring out again. Well, we've all fallen to the ground again, and when the shooting lets up, we're ordered to take battle lines. We get into our battle lines, and we're told we're supposed to push them Yankees off the top of that ridge. And do you know it took us over 2 hours to fight them Yankees off that ridge? Stubborn. Well, we get them running. We got to the top of the ridge. We start coming around down the other side. and there's this long strip of woods. And we're told to hunker down in them woods in battle lines and wait for our next orders. So we did what we were told, and sitting in the woods, and from where we were sitting, you could see everything. You look up to the north, you could see General Ewell's men, and you could look over across the ridge, and you could see another ridge. And on that ridge, you could see all them Yankee soldiers over there, taking every piece of artillery they had, pointing it at us. And there was nothing we could do about it. We just had to sit there and watch them. Finally, orders given. We're to march out them woods, march down to the bottom of the ravine, come up the other side, and push the Yankees off the next ridge. Well, our own Colonel Bergman, he leads us out. I'm so proud I'm busting my buttons. And we come down that ridge, and as we're marching away, following our Colonel Bergman, them Yankees, they start shooting at us. Dumb as stumps. Couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. See, every time they shot at us, they were hitting a tree branch or bushes or something, because they're shooting straight across at us. Problem was, is we got down to the bottom of that ravine, their aim got a lot better. Now they were shooting down at us. And that's when we started losing our boys. Got across the bottom of the ravine and across the creek, and lost a fellow on the right side of me. And just as I stepped across that ravine, lost a fellow on the left side of me. And we saw that first line of Yankees. Well, we start moving real quick once we get across that creek. And we busted right through that first line. We got the Yankees running. And they went about halfway up the ridge, halfway up that ravine, and that's when we had a problem. Because they made a second line halfway up. And we were no more than 20 yards away from each other. I could look right into the eyes of the fellow I was aiming at. That's a horrible thing. And our boys were falling right and left. See, the problem was our colors. When you're in a battle, it's loud and it's noisy and it's smoky and you can't hear what you're supposed to be doing. You can't see what's going on. So you look to your colors, your flag, and you watch. And if your flag moves forward, you're supposed to move forward. If your flag stays put, you stay put. And if your flag is moving backwards, you better hightail it out of there. Well, it wasn't just the easiest thing for us to see. It's the easiest thing for your enemy to see. And they know if they can stop that flag from moving forward, they can stop a whole lot of boys from moving forward. So that's who they were aiming for. Every time one of our fellows picked up that flag to move us forward, they'd go down. Our flag had fallen 9 times. It was so blood-soaked, it was hard to tell that it was ours. Colonel Bergman saw what was happening, so he hollers over to Private Honeycutt to grab up that flag and get us moving. Private Honeycutt pick it up and bam, bam, both of them go down. Well, I guess Lieutenant Colonel Lane, he saw what happened. He goes running over and he starts yelling and screaming. He's hollering us to fix our bayonets. And I put my bayonet on my rifle and I just heard him shouting and barking out orders right and left. And then he started screaming really loud. And there was something about the way he was screaming that just, it set my blood on fire. And I couldn't help it myself. I started hollering and screaming too. And he was hollering and screaming, and we were all hollering and screaming. And before you knew it, he was screaming, charge! And we did. We charged through that second line. We busted right through it. And we charged up the side of that ravine. And we busted through the third line. And we got the Yankees running. We busted them right through when they ran right off the top of that ridge. And it was ours. That ridge was ours. And we stood on top of that ridge. We stood on top of that ridge that we fought for and now belong to us. Well, standing up on that ridge like that. It was the first time I had, I guess, a chance to catch my breath. And the air was so thick with smoke, dust, and the sulfur burned at my nose. And I just looked around and I could see all these bodies on the ground. Yankee, Reb, and the pools of blood. And then I heard it. I heard moaning. And then I heard someone whimper. And then I heard another voice calling out for his mama. Can you imagine that, a grown man calling for his mama? Someone else was begging for some water. It all seemed like a dream. So when I heard those voices, I guess that's what snapped me out of it. Mother, we started with almost 900 men in our regiment. After our first day of battle, there were only 250 left. Over 80 of our men had been killed and 500 of them wounded. Today we spent in camp, tending to the wounded, both Confederate and Yankee prisoner. I can only guess who will survive and who will return to the darkness of the earth. Many will pray for it. The wounds are already festering, the bodies are piling up, and we're doing the best we can. Some of the graves are mass. There's just so many of them. Mother, I still fight for my beliefs, but I could never have fathomed the precious cost. Your loving child, E. Stanton Myers.
My regiment, the 20th Maine, was fresh from the campaigns in Chancellorsville, and we arrived late on the night of July 1st on a road a small distance from a schoolhouse outside the town of Gettysburg. All through the night, men and boys was arriving behind us, and it was plain to see there was going to be a great battle. In the morning, we was given orders to move up the road to make room for the rest coming in behind us. It was a mixture of confusion and excitement. This was going to be my first real battle, and I didn't know if we was going to attack or defend. We heard some artillery fire on Culp's Hill in the morning, and our commander, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. I didn't tell you about him. Oh, he's a good man. He took the place of that dreadful Colonel Ames. Oh, he don't have much military training. He was a professor of language and dialect at Bowdoin College. But the men like him well enough, and he seems fair. After all, we've had 4 commanders. Well, he says we was going to march on Culp's Hill, and he was right. We made our lines and started the march. But just as quick as we did that, our orders was changed, when artillery and rifle fire broke out to the west and behind us. So we had to make a quick turn, at a quick time, without proper use of the road. We ran through the open fields, hopping over hedges, all the way through a little swamp and down to the wheat field. And when we got to the wheat field, we seen our own boys in blue, running toward us. Well, I don't mind telling you, you see your own men running toward you, you figure there's something chasing them. And you have mind to turn tail and run. But we was ordered to hold our position and wait for more orders. So we did. From where we were standing, I could look down at an outcropping of boulders. I could barely see the rocks. Couldn't see the men at all. The artillery fire from the enemy was so thick and heavy in that spot, and the rifle fire too. And I reckon the men that were down in that place, who weren't dying from being shot, were suffocating. And then our orders come. We was going to march toward a hill they called Little Round Top. Well, the artillery fire was too heavy on the eastern slope of that hill, so we had to skirt around to the southern side and make use of an old logging trail. The men were footsore and weary. We were averaging a march of 25 to 30 miles per day, and some without shoes on their feet. Cooks and servants took up stretchers and rifles. They made a triage behind the lines, and the rest of us climbed. The artillery fire on top of that hill was hitting the boulders and rocks, and there were fragments of rock flying in every direction. And then whole tree limbs were being shot down on top of us. Whole tree limbs were pinning the men to the ground. We'd lost so many before we even got to Gettysburg. And now we were losing them before we even got to the battle. We got up to the top of that hill. We hadn't quite made the rise yet. And don't it go all quiet like. The fire stopped. And I says to Sam, the veteran standing next to me, I said, "Don't that just beat all? My first battle and it's over before we get there." He says, "Lad, you better brace yourself for what's to come. It just means the enemy's so close they don't want to hit their own. You wait. All hell's about to break loose." And weren't he right about that? No sooner did we get over the top of that hill than I heard that god-awful banshee scream. And up the hill the Rebs come thick as flies. They were firing on us and we were firing back. They retreat and then we'd retreat. Now, usually it take about 45 rounds of ammunition in the morning. And after all the firing on that hill, when I reached into my ammo case, my hand came up empty. I looked around and all the other men, they were shaking their heads too. We was out of ammunition. During one of the lulls, one of the retreats, when the Rebs were back down off the hill, the colonel says, "I want some of you men and boys to go down that hill and see what you could find." So we ran down the hill, taking ammo and rifles off from one man and the other. Union soldier and Red, didn't matter. They weren't going to need him anymore. When I get almost down to the bottom of that hill, when someone at the top shouts, "They're coming back for more!" So I turned tail and ran up the hill. I didn't even cross the line when men and boys was taking rifles and ammo out of my hands one after the other. And one, Henry, he and I are standing toe to toe. He reached out and took a rifle from my hand. And didn't he catch a mini bomb right between the eyes? I never saw nothing like that. Henry's mouth was open. And I was all covered in Henry's blood. Well, someone grabbed me and pulled me to the ground, and my rifle was up and I was firing before I knew what I was doing. I caught a Reb in the chest. I seen him go down. I said, that one's for Henry. But they just kept coming. During one of the lulls of the battle, I seen Private George Washington Buck go down. He was a young man, a private. Though he'd been an officer in his last regiment, they busted him down to private. And he's lying on the ground with his young life's blood just soaking into the earth. And our commander, Colonel Chamberlain, is kneeling over him. That boy says, "Sir, tell my ma died brave." Can you imagine? The only thing that boy wanted was for his mama to think he was brave. And the colonel, God bless that man, there ain't no one more fitting to wear the Union uniform than himself, and I would follow him to hell if I had to, I'll tell you the truth. Don't he look down at that boy and say, "Son, I'll tell your ma you died a sergeant." Promoted him on the spot. But the lull didn't last long, and then he's coming back from war. Finally, our orders were to hold that hill at all cost. That means, if we die, we die, but we're not leaving that hill to the enemy. And we was told we were the end of the Union Army. You know what that means? That means out there on the ridge, I could see Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, other boys in blue like me. But out there, nobody but the rebels. And I reached into my ammo case, and it was empty again. But we planned to do a left wheel down the southern slope of that hill, which just meant that we were so thin, we were spread out on the top of that hill as it was, but we figured our best chance was to line our men up at the top and off to the side of that hill, and to bring our men in a scoop down the hill while the rest of us came down from the top to catch the enemy between us. And the colonel says, "Fix bayonets." It's one thing to shoot a man at 100 yards. It's something else to look him in the eye and know he has a family like yours. The colonel drew his saber and he shouts, "Charge!" And just like St. Michael the Archangel, he flew down the side of that hill. And I said I'd go to hell with him, and I did. I ran behind him, and the rest of us followed. And I knew as I raced down the side of that hill that would be my last day on earth. And then something like a miracle happened. It had to be a miracle. The enemy, one by one, they dropped their rifles and raised their hands. They surrendered. And me, without a bullet to my name. We held the hill. We won the day.
You know, there's an awful lot of waiting when you're in the Army. You think it's all battles when you sign up, but really it's a lot of waiting and sitting around, especially when night comes. A lot of the fellers like to tell stories. I think their favorite thing to tell is ghost stories. I don't take much of them ghost stories. I don't believe them. But I will say that I had something particularly unusual happen to me. When I left home, I was outfitted with everything I pretty much needed, including a canteen. But after a couple of days, I lost it, which I'm sure wouldn't surprise my mom, because she always said I'd lose my head if it weren't attached to my shoulders. So every time we got to a creek or a river or a lake or whatever, and we was given our leave, I would end up going over and drinking as much as I could fill my belly up with, never knowing when I was going to drink next. So we was marching along across near a river, and we was given to take our rest. So I dropped my stuff and I went right over to that river, and I was down on my hands and knees lapping it up like a dog. Well, I lifted my head up to get a gulp of air, and I noticed a fella sitting next to me. And I looked at him and glanced over, he was soaking wet. I mean, he was dripping, water dripping from his beard. He was soaked. So I kind of made a joke. I said, most fellers take their clothes off before they go swimming. And I went down to take another gulp of water when he says, don't know how to swim. Well, it wasn't so much what he said, it was the way his voice sounded. It was strange. It was kind of hollow, and I don't know. So I turned and I got another good look at him. And then I noticed he wasn't just dripping wet. He looked, I don't know. Well, he looked pale. Like something about him was missing. And he was looking at me. Well, he wasn't even he was looking at me. It was like he was looking through me. His eyes were so blue. Bluer than that river. And his skin was so pale. His lips were blue. Like he'd been cold. And then he reaches out and he's holding a canteen in his hand, stretching it to me. And he says, "A lady ought never go thirsty." I didn't know what to say at first. I mean, how would he know? Nobody else knew. So I didn't know what else to do. So I took the canteen and I said, I don't know what you're talking about, no lady, but if you got extra canteen and you're looking to give it to me, I'm happy to have it. I'm quite grateful. And I reached down to fill it up with water. And as I'm filling it, he says again, "A lady will never go thirsty." I turned to look at him and really thank him properly. But when I turned to go look at him, they weren't there. And what made it really strange is where he'd been sitting, dripping wet. The ground was bone dry. Like I said, I don't take much of these ghost stories that fellers tell around the fire. But that was strange. And I did get a canteen, one I really needed. And this one, I wasn't going to lose. I was going to hang on to it. I was going to hang on to my dying day.
Just before the battle, Mother, I am thinking most of you. While upon the field we're watching, with our enemy in view, comrades brave around me lying, filled with thoughts of hope and pride. For well they know that on the morrow some may sleep beneath the sod. Farewell, Mother, you may never press me to your heart again. But oh, you'll not forget me, Mother, if I'm numbered with the slain. Farewell, Mother, you may never press me to your heart again. But oh, you'll not forget me, Mother,
if I'm numbered with the slain.
July 3rd, 1863. We was camped on a ridge. There's a lot of ridges in Pennsylvania. We was camped on a ridge just south of that town, Gettysburg. There was a seminary right at one end of in a long strip of woods, and that's where we were, in that strip of woods. And we was taking care of our boys. It was Sunday. General Pickett's men were having Sunday services, and they were singing hymns, and it sounded nice. It made me think of home. I spent that morning looking for my canteen because I lost it again, third time that week. I lose it a lot in my head if it were attached to my shoulders. Well, we got word that we was going to have a battle on Sunday. And all the artillery, all the big artillery, the cannons, they were all getting put in position in that woods we were in. And they were pointing them over to the east. And if you looked to the east, you could see there was a great big field. And beyond that field was another ridge, because it's Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of them. And on that ridge was a little bunch of trees and cemetery and the whole rest of the Yankee Army, all over there. So the plan was that we was going to take our cannons and blast them to smithereens. And along around 1 o'clock, order was given. Them cannons were to let loose, and they did. They let loose, and them cannons fired so loud and so long, it made the ground tremble. I remember lying down, stretching my arms out, thinking I was going to hold the whole world together so it didn't fall apart, shaking a bit. That went on, I guess, nearly an hour. And then finally, the word was that us infantry boys were going to be taking battle lines once them cannons stopped. And we were going to be in front of them. And then we were supposed to go across that great big field. And whatever the cannons didn't blow to smithereens, we were supposed to clean up and get the rest of it. Well, we were in the front, 26th North Carolina. General Lee himself came trotting by. He took one look at us and said we was too beat up. He put us back in the third line. Then it took a long time. It took a long time to get us out of them woods. And I could see why. Because when the order was given and we started marching out, I could look down the line, and there were so many of us. I couldn't see the end. It must have been more than a mile long of us boys, straight down. And the higher ups, they had such a hard time getting us marching out together because we was so long, that line was so long. And as we started to move out of the woods, the order was no whooping, no hollering, march just be quick, a quick march. And I looked across that field, and there weren't nothing in it. There were no stone walls, there was no ditches, no trees, no bushes, nothing to hunker down behind if you needed to. I don't mind telling you, I didn't like it. But I figured how many Yankees could be left on that other side? After all that artillery fire, how could there be any Yankee soldiers left over there? So as we was given the order, we start marching out. We start moving pretty quick. And the only thing that was in that field was a road that kind of went a little bit diagonal, and it had a rail fence. And we got about to that rail fence, and we started climbing over, when all of a sudden, it starts raining lead from the sky. It's just this blasting starts piercing through your ears, and all this all this shot comes raining out of the sky, and it's coming from the ridge in front of us. And I think to myself, how could there be any Yankees left over there? How could they be firing on us? And the boys in front of us had started climbing over that rail fence, and they're shot just as they're climbing over. And the boys in the second line start climbing over the rail fence, and they're climbing over the bodies of the fellows that were in front of them. And as they're climbing over, they're just shot after shot after shot. The boys are falling down. Well, I managed to climb myself over that fence, get over two boys, drop to my knees, pull out my rifle. I take shots, then all of a sudden, them Yankees break out with grape and canister. You don't know what that is. All right, it's if you take a tin can and you fill it with a bunch of lead marbles. You stuff a cram full in there, and then you cram it into a cannon, and you fire it off. And when that hits its target, it blasts, and that lead goes flying every which way. And if you want to put a line in a roll of men, that's the fastest, most effective way of doing it. And that's what they were shooting at us. Whatever fellows were in front of me were gone. They were blasted to smithereens. And there I stood with my rifle in my hand, and all I could think is, I just have to get to that stone wall on that ridge. And I drop to my knees, and I fire my rifle again, and I reload, and I crawl on my elbows, and all this is going on. They just kept shooting, and it was cannons, and it was rifles, and it was dust, and it was smoke, and it was going on, and fellows would go to the right, and they'd fly to the left, and there were hands and arms and haversacks, and they just kept firing. And I thought, I have to get to that stone wall, and I'd crawl a little farther, and I'd pick up my rifle, and I'd fire, and I'd drop back down to my knees, and then I could see it. It was no more than 20 yards away from me, and I thought, I can just get to that stone wall. And before I could lift my rifle, I felt something hit me hard in the chest. And it knocked me backwards. And I realized I was flat on my back. And I was just looking up at the sky. It felt like I just had the wind knocked out of me, but I reached my hand inside my jacket. It was wet. And when I raised it up to my eyes, I could see it was all covered with blood. I could hear each breath in my ears. I could feel my blood just moving up and down my veins. But when I looked up, all I could see was bright blue sky.
My regiment was given leave to recuperate in a copse of trees on that third and final day of battle. But we held the earth as we felt the thunder of the enemy cannon all through the morning. At the end of 3 days' battle at Gettysburg, 50,000 men, 5,000 horses, and at least one woman lay dead in the hot-to-rise sun. Another 20,000 were left in the care of the citizens of Gettysburg, and there were only 2,500 citizens. Not a person, not a place went untouched by those 3 days. And the stench of death clung to the sky for months to come. Imagine what it was like for the rebel soldiers as they marched across that open field, thinking they had annihilated the Union Army, only to find that they had missed their target. That cost them everything. Had they not miss their target. Had they not believed that we had ammunition on the ground top, had they won that day, they could have very well won the entire war. And we might be living in a different country, all because of mistakes. The victor writes the history. Dearest Mother, I've not written, but I hope Emily has at least told you of my safety. I can no longer keep secret my actions. I am soldiering. You may not understand this, but please know that at least I am safe. Mother, I have seen the most of what is good and what is bad in mankind. I have killed and buried many a soldier. But Mother, there are some things worth dying for, as surely as they are worth living for. Freedom is among the greatest of these. These men have gone to the Almighty for that greatest purpose. I hope that you will find a way to understand what I have done, to come to realize that to do nothing when our countrymen gave their life's blood that we might all remain free would have been worse than anything I have seen. Mother, I am coming home. Your loving daughter, Lorna.
K-stroke, K-stroke.
They're rolling out the guns again, hurry.
K-stroke, K-stroke.
They're rolling out the guns again, hurry. Hurry. They're rolling out the guns again. They'll never take our sons again. No, they'll never take our sons again. Johnny, I swear this is who we are. Well, in just a few minutes, we're going to take a break, but we usually take a few minutes for questions if you have any of us, and we will do our best to answer them. Do you have anything you'd like to know about the program or anything at all? Yes?
The characters you portrayed, were they real?
Or do you want to answer that one?
They were not. We created them. We created them specifically so they would be located in strategic locations we wanted to represent. So that being said, with a lot of study, like in my regiment, the 26th North Carolina, there actually had been a woman that fought, and there's been a little bit of, at first it was thought that she had died on the field, and there's been some recent research saying that, maybe she lived to collect her pension as a soldier. So, but I'm not representing that woman.
What happened to the women when they were found out?
Sent home, they were sent back, but many of them went back and enlisted with another name, and they were only found out if they were injured. A doctor would have to examine them, and then they were found out and they were sent home. Those that managed to make it to the end of the war undiscovered could go on and they would collect their pension. They would stay as men.
Yeah.
They would stay disguised.
And, the 20th Maine, did they have a woman in their regiment?
Don't know.
We don't know, because they didn't go to the hospital, they weren't found out. Chances are not. It was not something that was real common, but there were at least 400 documented cases of women who disguised themselves and fought in the war.
So those are the only ones that were found out.
Yeah.
There's a woman buried in Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite women was Emma Edmonds. If you have a chance, look her up. She disguised herself as a man, and they needed a spy to disguise themselves as a woman. So she took the job. So she was
really good.
Woman
So.
disguised as a man who disguised herself as a woman. She was a good spy. As I mentioned before, it took us 6 years to develop this program.
Why did they do it? Did they just do it for the money like you said the character did, or were there other reasons?
Well, Bob, following husbands, money, patriotism, adventure.
Perhaps escaping something, in their lives, a new chance to be somebody else.
And a chance to make a difference where they couldn't perhaps otherwise.
In your research, did you find any documentation that these women wrote letters home that actually survived?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's not something I really, specifically got on my way to find, but I think it's a brilliant idea.
We'll look that up.
Yeah.
We did read a lot of letters.
Yeah.
And there were many, many letters, but whether they were from women, I never took note. I actually have a copy of a letter that my great however many greats back grandfather wrote to his wife from the hospital. He was wounded. So we did a lot of research and we patterned our letters after the types of letters we read.
Yeah, Craig.
I know you've been performing this program for some time. Can you tell us, has it gone through any changes, expansions, contractions, modifications?
Initially we had the program timed out at about an hour and a half, and we had to do some cutting. Lorna had done a great ghost story.
Which, by the way, is in the ghost story book on the table.
I was going to say, was then printed. It is now for purchase. Needed to bring it down to under an hour for schools. And I think, as you know, Craig, whenever you tell a story, you're going to have, it's never going to be the same way twice. The energy changes, the audience changes, you change, and there are some, sometimes you're just really on fire and you feed off each other's energy.
There are keywords, and
Yeah.
we use those as cues for each other. We also do a follow-up workshop for children. So we've done this for grades 4 to adults, and we can teach the children how to develop their own personas. And then they do a presentation, and boy, have we seen some incredible growth in the kids, sometimes just working with them for a couple of hours. It's pretty spectacular.
And sometimes you get somebody that wants you to zero in on different things. We were in Elmira, and we did a lot of focus on the prisoner of war camp there. And then we were someplace else, and they were very interested in the slave quilts for the Underground Railroad. And so, of course, then we really dig in and we research and get our information, and so we can present it in a way that's very engaging.
We didn't add it to this program, but we added it to our workshops and to our Q&A.
Any pictures of these women?
No. Well, yeah, in our brochure.
There are.
They've got lots of pictures
Yeah.
that people have collected over the years, and I wonder if any of the women
I'll tell you what.
disguised as men had their picture taken.
I'll tell you what. There are a lot of pictures of men where I look at them and say, "That's a girly boy. He has to be a woman." I mean, a baby face and all. They look very.
Yeah.
They look somewhat feminine, and you're kind of like, "Are they? Aren't they?" But
You don't look at the pictures the same way anymore. Now you're like always
No.
questions like, guy, girl. I don't know.
Yeah, and people just didn't go up to somebody and say, "Are you really a girl?" They just didn't. So they managed to stay pretty much private. People were very private then.
There are places in Gettysburg where you could go and perform this.
We tried to get our foot in the door, but we might be ready to look at that again. That was early when we were.
Yeah, and my girls came home since then, so it really limited how far I could travel and what I could do. Starting to change again.
Yeah, we might think about that again. It's been a few times.
I'm wondering about the subject of vaccination. Am I correct that one of the things that you said was that that someone actually got the disease through the vaccination?
Yes, or at least that's what they thought. You get the injection and then all of a sudden a bunch of people are getting sick, and it's like,
And you had the reuse of hypodermics back then too.
and not the kind of conditions that we're used to.
More soldiers died from disease than from battle.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Infection was the worst.
infection.
Because they didn't clean, I mean, they could amputate a leg in less than 90 seconds.
Jeez.
And then move on to the next one.
Yep. And they would cauterize it and they're done. And just keep moving through.
You also had the issue of farm boys that, you know, they lived in their community.
Yeah,
And there
step
was-
forward a little bit, you're out of the screen now. We're live streaming tonight. Hi, everybody.
And they lived in their community, there was space, and then all of a sudden they enlist and they're in these very tight quarters, exposed to people from other areas that they didn't have the immunity, you know, and so you would get whole regiments that were, you know, coughing their brains out and sick, because they just didn't have the immunity built up. And that takes time.
So, yes, Wendy.
I lived in Gettysburg 2 different times in my younger years, in junior high school, and then when I was in college, I went to Gettysburg College, and I've been all over that battlefield on my bicycle zillions of times, and read all the monuments, and, you know, seen some of the shows, and it's really brought it alive in a way that
I'm
I
so
didn't get
self-conscious
that
now.
then.
I am so self-conscious now, because you've seen everything, it's like, did I get right?
years ago. I antediluvian times.
But a couple of our field trips were to Gettysburg, and we hired a guide, and we said, okay, this is the story we're doing. Show us where we would be positioned. So we actually went and we saw it, and, you know, we got out to almost Pickett's Field, and I pointed my finger and went bang, and she fell down and looked at the bright blue sky, and that's how that got in there, so, yeah.
And then she had to drive around and see it at nighttime.
No, we're not gonna talk about this.
Well, you did really make it come alive. You were on McPherson's Ridge.
Oh, yeah.
Part of the story was
Yeah.
where Reynolds got killed.
Yeah.
And just with that Culp Sill that you talked about, that was actually Culp's farm. His son went to work in the South when the war broke out and fought for the Confederacy, and came back and fought in Gettysburg and was killed on his dad's hill, Culp Sill. There's just so many stories.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot like that.
What?
A story for every soul,
Yeah.
at least one.
I'm curious, when you were talking about when they shot, were you talking about the railroad cut? Did they, because you were on that first day. You were
On the first day?
Yeah, because that's where they shot right down the railroad cut, and a lot of Confederate.
Actually, the 26th, they had actually been in the woods, and it was hard because I couldn't get to actually where they were because of the way the overgrowth was. I could drive down
You were on
the
that
road,
that
it
really
was
deep
coming
ridge.
down,
Yeah.
and then there was the ravine at
It's
the
a real
bottom,
deep
and it's
ravine.
about 3 miles.
And I was wondering how they ever got through that. It was such a steep ravine.
It was, and you could see, it's kind of hard because you know that the growth is, the terrain has changed over the last many years. And so I had to imagine as they were shooting, how they would be shooting, how they'd be shooting across, what they would be hitting, and then as their aim improved going down. But yes, the ravine is really steep. And, you know, I could not get my feet on the ground at that particular place, which is kind of disappointing. But I did get in Pickett's Church, so. That was good. It was good to be out in the field.
I got to sit on the rock where Joshua Chamberlain was.
Yeah.
On the top of Little Round Top.
Yeah. I look forward to going back someday and just continuing to learn. The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And you can spend a lifetime studying and still find different things to learn and glean from the
And
experience.
this was also the cusp of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of technology was being developed for the first time. The telegraph, the torpedo, and so many things.
The Gatling gun.
The Gatling gun, the
Yeah.
submarine, and it just is amazing when you start to look at how we were fighting a war at the same time people were creating things, and not all of those things were war related. You know.
There was, when you talk about, for example, so many mistakes that could have turned the tide of that particular battle, and that battle would have turned the tide of the war. But every day, there was a point in time when the Confederacy could have won the day, and that would have been it, especially day one. Day one, they didn't know how much of the upper hand they had gotten in that day. And you're right with Chamberlain, that it was the end of the line, and if they broke, that means that the Union Army would have been totally flanked, and that would have been.
Yep.
It's neat to see you guys, it's neat to see you guys dramatize it.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Thank you. We're going to take an intermission. We have the refreshments, and we will open the floor to anybody who'd like to tell. If you would like to tell a story, it does not have to be a Civil War story. Please see me during the break, and we'll wind you up. Oh, yes, I have to pass around the basket for tips. Come here and say goodbye to the people out there. I hope this worked. Goodbye, people.
Thank you.
Don't be drunk.